Going to call the meeting to order. Let the minutes reflect that 4 of the commissioners are present. Mayor Gilligan is not able to make it today, and all the pertinent city staff is here. And first item on the agenda is the consent agenda. The items listed on the consent agenda are considered by the governing body to be routine business items. Approval of the items may be made by a single motion, second, and majority vote with no separate discussion of any item listed. Should a member of the governing body desire to discuss any item at his or her request, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Consent agenda includes consider minutes of the commission meeting from November 16th, ratification of payroll ordinance for the period ending November 23rd, consider approving the city charge-offs, consider approval of change order for sanitary sewer lift station number 6 project, consider approval of change order for water treatment plant ozone equipment installation project, consider and set bid date and time for 2016 water main replacement project number WM1601. And what is the pleasure of the commission?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 4-0. And now we have time for public comment. Does anyone from the public have anything they would like to comment on now? Does anyone else? Okay. No comments. We will move on to item 3 on the agenda. Airport land acquisition. Request to approve this. We're going to have Frank A. Bart, Public Works Director.
Good afternoon, everyone. I sort of jumped the gun there on your public comment. I was almost up here, so.
Well, you could have gone.
So what you have before you here, you may recall earlier this year we had talked in a closed session actually about a tract of land that was adjacent and northeast of the current Emporia Municipal Airport. And through this long Federal Aviation Administration process, they've gone through all of the hoops and everything, and it's, as you may recall, everything associated with the acquisition is at a 90% match, so the city's obligated for 10% of all the costs of this acquisition, which, if this is approved today, I think our total costs are going to be in the neighborhood of around $13,000 to the city when you include the appraisals and the survey and title search and all of that business. What's before you today is the recommendation to pursue the actual acquisition at a total cost of $81,915. And this is all in keeping with the federal aviation process, which I might add is very lengthy. And I think we've had this chat before. But they really require acquisition of this property if there is a willing landowner so that they have a clear zone or a safety zone adjacent to their runway out here. So that's the whole reason why they're driving this acquisition. So that's why we're here, and hopefully this will be approved today, and I think the closing is established for December 20th. And I would entertain any questions if I need to refresh anybody's memory about what's going on there.
Yeah, is this the last, or are we going to be able, or are required to acquire more land for a safe landing area? Or will this satisfy all the requirements for the FAA?
As far as I know at this time, this should satisfy all of their requirements. And if you look at the aerial of it and the location of it, you can see where it finishes off that safety zone that they were particularly interested in. As far as I know, this is it now.
Okay.
And
We kind of are under obligation if any landowner adjacent to that property ever notifies us of an interest in selling property, we have a bit of an obligation to contact the FAA and let them know, and then we'll let them tell us, I guess, if they feel that's something we should be pursuing.
If in the future we decide to go ahead and extend that runway, that extra approximately 1 foot that is supposed to be legitimate for some small jets, would we need
Would
to
be more than a
acquire
foot.
more?
But yes, we
I think
would.
it has to be at least 5,000, and we're
Yeah.
a little shy of that. But would we be required to acquire more land?
We
for-
would.
As safety zone? So
Yes.
this may not be the end of it if we decide to go ahead and straighten out that home.
Correct, and in fact, that planning process for that project is something completely different, and I'm hoping that's starting to wrap up sometime in the next quarter as well.
But I think it's all going to get shoved towards the south.
At this point,
Into the golf course.
that hasn't been decided, but it kind of looks that way at this point. Because if you go north, you're running into houses and all kinds of stuff, so.
Which fund did this cost come out of? How did we end up paying for this once we closed the deal?
General
We've already-
fund, I'm
yeah,
thinking.
General fund, we've accounted for that already.
It's in a project fund right now.
Okay.
And we've transferred our share over. We're
Is this
just
the
waiting on.
project fund from last year or the one we set for this year? For the airport?
Actually, we have 2 projects at the airport. One's a land purchase and one's the master
planning.
plan.
And those are all in this current year budget though, right?
Yes.
Right.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah, and there was actually $20,000 of our part of this match allocated for this project for this year in the budget. And so we're well under that. Like I think I said earlier, it's like $13,200 of our commitment.
Yes, and this is such a long process. I was just making sure we hadn't crossed the fiscal year.
Yeah, we were approached about a year ago. That's how long.
Projects across the fiscal year, we transfer out to a project.
Right.
That way we can do that.
That's the only questions I have in here.
Do I hear a motion?
Move we authorize the mayor to sign the agreement to acquire land for the airport.
It's been moved and seconded to go forward in acquiring the land for the airport. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 4-0. Next on the agenda is wastewater treatment plant upgrades, public meeting. So we do the public meeting first, or do we want some presentation first?
We're prepared to give a very brief presentation.
Okay.
If that's all right.
That would be very good. And we
so-
don't want them to comment until they know what they need to comment about.
So we're here for the public meeting is the correct characterization in order to make this official with the state revolving fund and KDHE. This is a required meeting, and I have BG here, who's the consultant representing our interest, ours being the city of Emporia's interest. So they are prepared to give a briefing, and Nathaniel, if you'd come on up and do your magic.
Thank you, Frank. Good afternoon. As Frank said, my name is Nathaniel Monaco, and I'm with BG Consultants, who's acting as the city representative for the city on this project. You should all have in front of you a summary that I'll go through, and also 7 different slides, of 4 of which we'll have up here to discuss specifically. But this public meeting is to discuss the wastewater treatment plant and the alternatives evaluated for potential improvements. And the existing plant, original construction was dated back into the 1920s. And there's been actually there's been 9 major improvements since that time. And this will end up being the 10th with that. As a background, the city received a new NPDS, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. That's a federal EPA permit that's carried by the state KDHE. You received that in May of 2013. And one of the things that were included in that was lowering of effluent limits for nitrogen and phosphorus. Actually, the nitrogen numbers will be a 10 part per million, or milligram per liter, and the phosphorus are 1 part per million as that is set. And one of the things that I have up here as slides, the one here closest to me is actually effluent information from 2014 from the plant and averaging over on monthly values. And as you can see, as you go through there, and this information was originally part of the engineering facility plan that you guys commissioned, and it was presented to you in June of 2015. And these numbers, if you remember, this one is total nitrogen, and the level is 10 milligrams per liter, and where the average effluent is almost 28. So it's a substantially above that level. And with the best month being in June of 14, somewhere in the 19, so over almost twice of what the new permit. The one farther is for phosphorus, and that new level is at a 1, and the average there, as you go through, and a big part of that was around 4, and what that comes down to is, and that quite often is one of the major components in any nutrient removal plant that we'll be looking at. As part of that facility plan that was done and presented in 2015, there were 2 major alternatives that were addressed within that facility plan. Both of them included a renovation from anaerobic digestion of the sludge to aerobic, and that is in due form because of this nutrient removal requirement. One of them had a membrane bioreactor component as an alternative, and the other one was upgrading facilities, adding additional components to the plant to do the nitrification and denitrification that would be required of that. But after that facility plan was done, the city moved forward, did a qualification-based selection to look at moving forward with the design of this facility. The city received 2 proposals, or 2 submittals of qualifications for that. Through the interview process, the city selected a different type of project delivery method, which is design-build, and with that, the group of Burns and McDonnell out of Kansas City and CAS contractors or constructors out of Topeka. So that's the design-build team, and they right away went to work of evaluating the existing facility. In concert with that, it's also important to note that they are their own entity, but they have worked, we developed what we would call a project team that included not only the design-build team, but also city staff. Frank and Scott Gumphrey were the primary components of city staff. Myself and Bruce Becker were the primary components of BG's representation with that. We've gone through, I don't know how many different meetings we've had here in Emporia, and have gone through a lot of different alternatives to address the nutrient removal criteria. And with that, we also looked at some state-of-the-art technologies. And one of the things that we came down to, because of the existing facility, is looking at what's called an IFAS system. It's an integrated fixed film activated sludge. And why that was selected in large part was you have existing aeration basins that are there. Previous alternatives included building new infrastructure to create the volume that the city would require. With this type of technology, we can use that same facility and not have to expand infrastructure. We can do everything within that particular structure. And this, real briefly, is just a representation of that. This is the existing basins that are there. We'll have an IFAS reactors, and we'll have what's required for the anaerobic and the anoxic zones. And the anaerobic is for the phosphorus reduction, the anoxic is for the denitrification to remove the nitrogen out of the plant. So when we went through there, we also, as we were evaluating the total facility, one of the things that kept coming up was aged infrastructure and equipment, and optimization in both control in power consumption and just a better process through some of those. And throughout that system, in those evaluations, we came to what is identified as alternative number 3A that will be the primary component of the biological treatment, will be in the new IFAS system. We are looking at an administration building. This is an a new aerobic digester, and we'll do conversion of one of the other existing. We're going to do some new pumps, a lot of pumps, upgrades, UV upgrades for the disinfection. We're going to replace drives in the clarifiers, which will expand that capacity of those units. We're going to look at a grit system replacement, actually into a much more efficient type of a system. And with the influent pump station, we have eliminated a double pumping scenario, which should save a substantial amount of dollars in regard to your current operations. And then we'll have a process building that will house all the major components, which will allow a much more efficient maintenance, long-term use of those facilities. So with that, one of the things that Frank had said, this is a requirement of the KDHE SRF, and additional information both in detail on the plant as well as financing will be discussed at the public hearing in two weeks on the 21st. So with that, I guess I'll ask any questions or anything that
That concludes our brief presentation.
it does.
Okay. And no action required. And I read public hearing, and it was public meeting, so we're not even going into a hearing. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
I think for other cities have been faced with this. How many cities are now in compliance or in process? Do you know offhand?
About every city that's larger than Emporia is already in compliance or is currently in the process. Other cities of like size are also in that process. I know Hayes right now is going through this process. They were ahead of you and now we're ahead of them, so we've kind of jumped ahead of them. But there are many, and it's starting with the smaller cities as well. It's hitting everybody. The typical way is they start at the biggest producers, they get them in compliance, and they just start moving down the line.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Frank, do they have copies of this? Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. Better.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to consider approving ordinance amending the City of Emporia Industrial Revenue Bonds, Series A 2015 and Series B 2015, issued on behalf of Smoots Enterprises 2 LLC.
Approximately 30 days, the city was contacted by Greg Conklin from RCB Bank in Winfield, Kansas. And he made the request, they're planning on lowering the interest rate on the outstanding bonds. And so I put him in contact with Mary Carson, our bond counsel, and they're going to do that through an amendment to the lease. And so the purpose of this ordinance that we're requesting that you pass today will do two things. We'll lower the interest rate, and we'll also change the trustee. Corner Bank was a trustee for this. RCB Bank out of, I think, Tulsa, Oklahoma area acquired Corner Bank. They're not interested in being trustees. That's not one of their points of business. So Security Bank of Kansas City, Kansas will be the trustee. So this ordinance will authorize the lease arrangements, which includes lowering the interest rate, and also designate the trustee.
And the remaining terms remain the same, and as usual, IRBs are just a pass-through for us.
Absolutely.
Responsibility of the borrower.
Yes.
And
City
falls
has-
back to the bank if there
Yes.
is a default, rather than to the
has
city.
no obligation.
Okay.
It's ordinance 16-48.
Moving for approve ordinance 16-48 as presented.
I second it.
It's been approved and seconded to pass ordinance 1648. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 4-0. And now we come to an annual approval of the resolution for official boundary list. I think rather than a bounty
I was
list.
gonna ask about that. Are we doing
Yes,
bounties now?
we're bounty hunting.
Correct.
Let's do the city boundaries, because there's been some changes this
There's been a
time.
couple of changes, there's been a few annexations, Edward Park property on 30th Avenue, the Tommy Dorich area at Prairie and South Avenue, and also the area for the new Frontier Farm Credit 18th Avenue and approximately America's Road.
Resolution number 3592.
3592.
Move we approve Resolution 3592, resolving the official boundary.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution for the official boundary for the city of Emporia for the coming year. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 4-0. Oh, report from the city manager on city activities.
We're going to act that next week meet at 9:30. We have a busy agenda. First thing, we have a group that would like to make a presentation on smoking in public parks. They have some recommendation to make. We have an update on Amtrak from, we believe,
Reverend McHenry
Reverend McHenry.
has requested this.
Then we have a discussion, the election, the mayoral election, and also we need to pass an ordinance to reflect the new state laws that were passed. And we have a gentleman here that will discuss a housing tax credit project. He's actually in this morning, and he may have a second project to look at. We were just informed of that this morning.
Multi-unit.
Pardon?
Multi-unit.
Multi-unit, yes. And then Frank will be here on a Clearwell transfer pipeline update, and we'll have discussion on the water bill roundup program. Then we'll have our holiday luncheon afterwards.
It's going to be a busy morning.
It will be. And we like to ask for a 15-minute executive session for attorney-client privilege and proprietary information of a private business corporation.
Move we go into executive session until 3:10 to discuss. 2:10.
That's a lot of stuff to talk about.
Attorney-client
Yes.
privilege and proprietary information of corporation.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to go into an executive session until 2:10
Did it
p.m. To discuss attorney-client privilege and proprietary information of a corporation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 4-0.